Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. So this video is going to be the start of a little series where we're going to do a dedicated video on each dog, and we're going to look at their personality, and also we're going to look at them as a working dog as well. So anyway guys, let's get into this first video, starting with the youngest dog, Echo. So guys, we're talking about Echo today. So he's the youngest. For those that don't know, Echo is 3 years old and he is Storm's son and Kate's grandson. Despite being the youngest, Echo is definitely one of the more calmer personalities here in the pack. He is going to roll right over the camera. So guys, like I was saying, Echo is probably one of the calmer border collies that we have here, just personality wise. He tends to be a little bit more typical of males as well, where they are a little bit more lackadaisical, a bit more comical. They don't really take things as seriously, and Echo's pretty chilled out. He's a big, lovely, sweet dog. However, Echo is not that keen on strange people. So actually, as long as you ignore Echo and you don't draw any attention to him, he's actually fine with strangers. It is when people start talking to him or drawing attention to him, he really doesn't like that coming from strangers, and he can get quite barky with them and growly, saying, "Stay away from me, I'm not sure of who you are yet." But once you get into Echo's inner circles, he's actually probably one of the sweeter and more calm and affectionate. So Echo is a complete male, and he's pretty typical of that. He's always scent marking. He tends not to get on too well with other male dogs. However, as long as other complete males aren't up in his face or try to be dominant with him, he'll actually be more avoidant than aggressive. Most of the time. We actually had a situation where there was a terrier at our work last week. It was a little bit dominant, and Echo and him had a little spat, but you could see Echo was going to the other side of the pen from him and just not looking at him and trying to avoid him pretty much the whole time, rather than get into a fight with him. However, most other dogs, so like neutered males and females, he gets on with pretty much great. Echo can be quite soft with strange dogs. So for example, there's a border collie that we work with who can be quite in their face, and you can see Echo sort of like jumps back and he's like not sure if he's allowed to play unless he gets up play by first. So dogs that come straight up to him, he's sort of like, you can see him being a bit shy, but he's got very good manners, like dog manners. So Echo really wants a play bow before he starts jumping around and playing, but when he does, he absolutely loves being around other dogs, especially females. Echo, a bit like Storm, he is a proper outside dog. He'll come into the house as long as he's getting attention, but past that, he finds the house pretty boring. He's used to being outside almost all of the time, so there's a lot more sights and sounds and smells out here, and Echo really does love smells. Especially, he's always rolling, he's always on the scent when he's not working. Echo is probably about 60% fluff. His coat is sort of different from the others. Even though Kate's is long haired, hers is very fine. Echo's does tend to be quite a heavy and quite a rough coat, but that does present some challenges. He's actually generally quite clean, but he does get knots in behind his ears because of the long fur, and knots at his back end near his tail as well. Storm wants a quick cameo in this video, won't you? Bye, Echo. Echo is probably also the hungriest. Echo eats extremely quickly. He loves his food as well. Even though Echo can be quite shy with dogs in the beginning when he's first meeting them and first introducing himself, he's actually super bouncy, and he can be quite rough with other dogs when he's playing, but he does tend to be quite good at matching whatever the dog that he's with is putting out. So with Storm, the play sometimes gets crazy, as you can imagine, with two working sheepdogs who are used to a bit of rough and tumble. But even when he meets other dogs, he can actually be quite good with more submissive dogs and dogs that maybe aren't that interested in that type of rough and tumble. Also, I find with Echo, his general obedience is quite good. Even when he's herding, sometimes he can sort of seem like he's maybe not wanting to take commands the first time, but around about the house and his general obedience, he's actually very good. If you tell him to stay in heel, he'll stay in heel. He really doesn't push the limits too much, where Storm and Kate do sometimes. And I find in general, and you guys can tell me what you think in the comments, but when it comes to simple obedience, I think sometimes male dogs are a bit better. And the reason behind that is, I think, like I say, male dogs do tend to be a bit more lackadaisical and dopey, which means they're not always in that high mindset, where sometimes with the female border collies, they're that raring to go, they're that excited to just do something, that they are constantly trying to walk ahead of you or push the boundary that they can be away from you a little bit further each time, where male dogs, or I find at least with the males that I've had, they tend to be a little bit more like, oh well, if he doesn't want me to walk over there, then I'm just gonna stand about and sniff in this area. So I don't know if that's maybe a difference in males or females, or whether that's just been my experience. But guys, we've talked about Echo in the home sense and what his personality is like, so now we're going to talk about him from a working standpoint. We're going to look at what maybe some of his weaknesses are and what some of his strong points are, and just generally how he is as a working dog. First off, Echo does carry a lot of his personality from home through. He's still quite lackadaisical even when he's at work. There's very little rushing him on. He tends to just go at a nice steady pace. And he does tend to sometimes stop and sniff interesting smells, but that's to be expected with a male dog. So when we talk about Echo's weaknesses, he is generally quite a good all-round dog. Sometimes he is a bit slow up the back of sheep and things like that, so when he's following them down and they're moving faster than he is, he generally doesn't speed up to catch up. He just sort of goes at his own pace, knowing that he's going to catch up eventually, which is actually fine. But I mean, if you're trying to get something done with any sort of speed, it can be frustrating, but I tend not to bother with it too much. If that's the pace he's wanting to go, it's the pace he's wanting to go. Even though Echo has a little more natural power than the girls, so a bit more of a natural presence, he can be a bit slower. He tends to not really, if sheep are slowing up and stopping up, he does tend to sit a long ways back, and he has to be told to come in quite a bit, when really he should be coming in on his own and knowing that those sheep, they've stopped, so he should know to come in, but a lot of the time he has to be told to come in. But they aren't really things that I would say were a big deal. I would say Echo has his basics well learned. I would say he's maybe not as technically correct as Storm in open field. He does run sometimes a touch too narrow in the outrun or too tight to the sheep. However, not huge problems, and overall he's a very good working dog. When it comes to Echo's strength, his speed, obviously everybody loves his how fast Echo can run, but when we're actually thinking about it from a working sense, one, the way he uses his body and the body language he uses, he is super good to look at when he's herding. He has this nice sort of slow crawl. He's very good at maintaining his pace and changing his pace without going into a run. So a lot of the time you'll see Echo is 1 foot at a time in front of the other, and when he's speeding up, he doesn't go into a run, he just speeds up that walk and he slows down that walk, and he's always nice and low to the ground. He's always in that stalking position, which is really good to see for a young sheepdog. Echo does tend to be the least patient, so when things aren't really going his way or sheep are getting up in his face, Echo will sometimes snap and lunge forward at them. And it's not necessarily a bad thing in some situations, but certainly in some situations you can see when things aren't going his way, Echo can get frustrated quite quickly. But on the other part of that, he does have a bit more power than Storm. He is better at moving and driving a herd, so that's when you're in behind a herd, you're going in one constant direction. Echo is very good at getting in behind a herd and driving them forward. Echo also has some very good instincts when it comes to herding sheep. Sometimes you can't just let him go, and he will move in and out as he thinks, and it is pretty much spot on. He's very good at balancing sheep. That is, if a dog was to sit directly behind a herd of sheep, the sheep would go, would list off in some way. So Echo is very good at finding how far to the left or the right he has to be to keep those sheep on a true line, which is called the point of balance. What else I'm going to put in as a sort of a strength for Echo here is Echo's very good at working with other people's dogs, so other shepherds. He tends to get on with most dogs except for other intact males, but we work with predominantly female packs, and as you can imagine, Echo gets on with them absolutely brilliant. Another sort of bit of Echo's that may be a sort of weakness is sometimes when he's taking his initial outrun, he doesn't always run fully out to where you would want him to be. Sometimes he stops a little bit short and needs a second command. Again, not a huge deal, but ideally you would like him to go right the way to the back of the sheep on one singular command. But again, not a huge deal. Just give him a second command and he'll get there eventually. Echo also works well in tight spaces in the fank. He is a little less forward as Kate. He doesn't run right in there, but with his sort of bigger natural presence, the sheep move away from him a lot quicker anyway, so he can just sort of dilly-dally his way around the pens and the sheep move. So that's a great thing. Echo is another strength of Echo's, we sort of touched on it a bit, but is driving sheep and the control he has over sheep when he's driving them, especially smaller herds. Smaller herds can be harder to control than a bigger herd. Because Echo's got that sort of very patient and he's very good at controlling his pace, he very rarely spooks sheep out when he's driving them, and he keeps control, and he can sit on an edge or sit out to the side of the sheep with you in behind them driving them, and he's relatively calm when he's doing it, and he does keep the sheep very calm, and he's very good when he's in those driving positions. In summary, Echo is a very good all-round sheepdog. I would say he's a jack of all trades instead of a master of one, and he really can go on and do everything. He may be slightly less technically correct than Storm in open field, maybe slightly less pushy when driving and working pens than Kate, but he really fits in well, and he really is a good all-rounder sheepdog. And he also works well with other dogs, whether that be my dog or someone else's dog, and that's something great. You can really see that you can take Echo out on himself, just by himself, and he can do a job, or you can take him out in a team and he works well with a team.